Y'all on this one got this drink up there. Do your thing. Put your hands together one time for me. All right, baby. Do your thing, Jim. All right, baby. All right, baby.
How have you been, Joe? Man, I'm tired. That's a lot of work out there. Well, you quite apparently recovered from fight now. My goodness, that was some performance. What's fight? I wasn't sick from fighting. I was just resting. Right. Well, of course, you've read the papers. You said tonight when you walked in that you're pretty bitter at reporters in general. Is that right?
Well, the guys really write things wrong, man. You know, and print things wrong. Then I don't think that's right. You know what I mean? If you can't print the right things, then you shouldn't say anything.
Well, here's your chance. Could you say what things were printed wrong that you want corrected?
Every damn thing.
Well, like what? Like what, Joe?
Well, because whatever they say, it was wrong. You know what I mean? It really wasn't like that way. Some things like maybe the blood was high. That's true. Something like the blood was high. That was true. But all the stroke business, brain damage, I don't feel it, man. I don't know where it's at, but I don't feel it.
Right. Well, you know, I myself, you know, they put out all these rumors that you were very sick, that you know you were very, very ill, and I even you know, I called the hospital myself.
I'm back out here to crank my motor up one more time, man. That's all I can say.
Well, there's the public out there. I mean, if you have to face them and say,
no public, where's that?
Well, they're going to be seeing this on TV, and you know what if you. I'm sure if they were here, they would ask the question.
I'm pretty sure they're here, man. Like I say, everything the rumor was going on, it was a bunch of lies. That's all. I'm healthy. I'm ready to go again with my boys, full speed.
Nothing
right on.
to it. Okay.
Hundreds of students poured out of Denby High this afternoon. They gathered in the streets around the school building. Police arrived. There was some rock and bottle throwing, and a cruiser window was smashed. Officers there made at least one arrest. For more than an hour, police rerouted traffic for blocks around the scene. Then, at the urging of a small group reportedly from another school, hundreds began a march toward Osborne High. The intention of most seemed to be a meeting with the Osborne students to talk over the board's new boundary plan. Meanwhile, at Osborne, a group of about 200 black students had already gathered across the street from their school. Apparently, they overheard police radios ordering officers to be on the alert for the marching Denby students. Their reaction was resentment and alarm. The word spread that Denby students were coming to fight. Police moved in to disperse the blacks. Rocks were thrown, scuffling broke out, and there were several arrests. Arriving Denby students, meanwhile, about a block away, were met by riot-equipped police, who eventually diverted them into a park which adjoins Osborne School. There, a meeting and discussion of the boundary plan, which failed to provide any answers, and the gathering dissolved. Later, it was learned that Denby and Osborne students will meet tomorrow at Denby at 1 o'clock.
Officials promised to open Collinwood High School, and even though over half the students stayed away, it was open, with a heavy police contingent to make sure it was peaceful. But it was also tense. 200 officers, some of them mounted, patrolled the area, while 700 National Guardsmen were on standby at various staging points in case they were needed. They never were called in because the crowds were kept moving before the trouble erupted. Much of the credit must go to a private group of Collinwood citizens, black and white. For days, they have quietly kept anger down as much as possible, helping the police break up problems before they grew too big to manage. Late today, Safety Director Benjamin Davis congratulated them, using these words: "These are people we can't do without. They probably saved the community from catastrophe." General Davis was at the scene all day, too, supervising the enforced calm. But even though it passed without incident, he was still not happy.
I'm not satisfied with anything today. I don't think I could possibly be satisfied with a situation that involves large numbers of policemen on the grounds of a school, the National Guard standing by to come on in case it's needed. How in the world could anyone be satisfied with a situation like that?
I'm
just got to number 1. And you know what this means? This means you can earn some real money.
London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. Build it up with iron and steel, iron and steel, iron and steel. Build it up with iron and steel, my fair lady. Iron and steel will bend and bow, bend and bow, bend and bow. Iron and steel will bend and bow, my fair lady.
Just like the old nursery rhyme says, London Bridge is falling down. Or to be more precise, it's sinking into the Thames River mud. This, perhaps the most famous bridge in the world, is sinking at the rate of 1/8 inch a year. So it'll be replaced by a brand new bridge if plans announced this weekend are approved by Parliament. And considering the cracks in this old bridge and the fact that it is sinking, Parliament appears to have no choice. This London Bridge has been here since 1836. It replaced a London Bridge that had stood on this exact same spot for 600 years. On that London Bridge, which was the only one that Londoners had to get across the Thames until 1749, at one time witches were drowned at the base of it, and up to 600 persons a day were executed near it and had their heads put on the spikes of the old bridge. That was the second London Bridge. The original, built by Roman engineers, was hauled down by invading Vikings in the 11th century. Now this, only the third London Bridge in history, is to be demolished, to make way for progress, and because it's falling down. Dan Rather, CBS News, London.
The nation's governors are showing here that what worries them most is what worries most Americans most, the Vietnamese crisis. State problems and even party politics are being subordinated to concern about the Vietnamese war. Now, speaking for the Democratic governors, John Connally of Texas set forth a blanket endorsement of President Johnson's policies till now, said that he and his colleagues were sure that whatever the president decided to do in the future in Vietnam would be wise and right. While Republican governors endorse Mr. Johnson's Vietnamese policies in general, they're not prepared to give the president Governor Connolly's kind of a blank check.
I think it would be entirely more appropriate for the President of the United States to be frank not only with the governors but with the nation at large about the extent qualitatively and quantitatively of our problems in South Vietnam and Southeast Asia. And I'm confident, as they always have, that if the President were frank with us, the people and their elected officials would support whatever action in the premises was deemed by the President and his advisors to be necessary.
I do not support the President's policy if it means that we are inevitably committed to war, to an escalation of war. And if this is the policy, then I think the President must go to the Congress of the United States and ask for a formal declaration of war. I would hate to see the United States get involved in an Asiatic war, which could in turn become a world war, merely on the basis of a resolution or on the basis of the President merely announcing to the people that we are now in such a war.
There had been some White House concern that the Governor's Conference would demonstrate enough disagreement with the President's Vietnamese policies to make it necessary for Mr. Johnson to come here himself. Well, despite some of these Republican reservations, the consensus here is that Mr. Johnson has as much bipartisan support in the state houses as he does in the Congress and in the nation at large. Martin Agronsky, CBS News, at the Governor's Conference in Minneapolis.
As far as Russians are concerned, the city of Leningrad is not only unlike any other city in the Soviet Union, it's unlike any other city in the world. The citizens of Leningrad tend to agree with that, a fact which annoys the people who live in Moscow, and that in turn delights the people who live in Leningrad, who like to refer to Moscow as just a great big country town. A Muscovite is apt to say rather defensively that Leningrad may have the architecture, but Moscow has the power. That, of course, was not always the case. Peter the Great founded the city in the early part of the 18th century as Russia's window on the West, as he called it, to encourage the penetration of Western ideas into a country that was still medieval in its ways. And he succeeded. Those Western ideas which Peter the Great encouraged became a raging storm one night in November 1917 on this square in front of the palace when the followers of Lenin charged the palace gates, scrambled over them, and brought down the provisional government which had taken over from the Tsar. Leningrad is full of museums, but in a small building on the Neva embankment, there is a museum which most foreign tourists rarely bother to visit. This is the Museum of the History of Leningrad, and one section of it is devoted to the almost incredible story of the siege of Leningrad during the Second World War. The German army invaded the Soviet Union in July of 1941, and by November the 22nd, the attack on Leningrad had begun. For the civilians inside the city, it was the beginning of a siege which would last 900 days. In that period, 632,253 Leningraders are known to have died of starvation. In the museum, there's the diary of an 8-year-old girl with these notations on succeeding days. Today, Auntie died. And on the next page, today, Uncle Misha died. And the next page, today, my sister died. And the next, today, my little brother died. And the next, today, Mama died. And on the last page, now they are all dead, and I am alone. The official records show that 470,000 of them were buried here in mass graves north of Leningrad. The cemetery is not a forgotten place. Leningraders go there and leave wildflowers on the markers, and an eternal flame is burning. A guide says that American tourists sometimes ask her, "Why do you have the cemetery on the tour? Why don't you people forget the war?" Because, the guide says, she tells them, we don't want to forget. But this is not a gloomy city. At this time of year, there's a light in the sky all night because Leningrad lies so far north, and during these white nights, as they're called, the young people stroll the streets, play guitars and dance, and inevitably do the twist. When they weren't dancing, they asked questions of an American. Not angry questions, but genuinely puzzled questions. What are you doing in Vietnam? What are you doing in the Dominican Republic? As for themselves, none of those young men said that he was anxious to go off to war, but of course that decision is not made by him or by anybody in Leningrad. The decision of that sort is made by the power, and the power is in the Kremlin, and the Kremlin is in Moscow. Here you just have the architecture and some bitter memories of a 20-year-old war. Hughes Rudd, CBS News, Leningrad.
There was a time when Britain's women, like her men, had a justified reputation for dullness, and they wore clothes to match. But that was before the boutique bonanza and the dolly rockers. The dolly rocker is a new breed of English kitten. Spurred on by the Liverpool beat in music, she is fiercely individualistic, oblivious to class, hell-bent to live it up, and to steal Paris's fashion thunder. Who is this girl who suddenly has made it very end to dress British? And where does she get those crazy clothes? Well, to begin with, she is not rich. The little Miss Average dolly rocker who romps and stomps in London's swinging discotheques lives in a bed-sitter flat. She may walk on the wild side at night, but her days are routine, with an office job that seldom pays over $40 a week and usually pays a lot less. How a $40 a week office girl dresses in bang up-to-the-minute clothes for her nightlife is the secret of London's boutique boom. Unlike their counterparts in Paris, Rome, New York, or anywhere else, London's boutique shops specialize in cheap, not expensive clothes. The city is full of them, all in the same pattern. The shops, that is. Small, not much to look at on the outside. But inside, a constant drum fire of music hot off the top of the pops list, and clothes hot off designers' drawing boards. London's boutiques are booming because the apparel on their racks is not this season's fashion, it is this week's. The gear, as the gals call it, changes almost daily. What was switched on around the clubs last night may be out with the dolly rockers in 48 hours. But no matter, dolly gear is priced from $3 to $6 a suit, made from the cheapest material obtainable. Buy it this payday, throw it out next.
Yeah? Wear it out tonight. Right.
Each boutique, each temple of dollydom, works at a madcap pace to keep its stock ridiculously low-priced and slightly wild, always striving to be striking enough to transform the fashion-hungry dolly rocker into a discotheque Cinderella. Round and round the English low-budget fashion wheel goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. But while it lasts, it's giving the high-priced fashion houses fits. Dan Rather, CBS News, London.
So good, and I wouldn't live without her, even if I could. They call her Valerie. Oh yeah, come on. Different than the way she looked before. I call her
Virginia, waiting with other draftees for the bus to that first Army camp. During World War II or Korea, the draft was almost universal, but nowadays fewer people are called. Graduate school or marriage offer routine deferments despite the American involvement in Vietnam.
All right, as I come to the position of attention, if you'll notice my feet, my heels are together.
But for these others, there is no deferment.
Angle. My knees are slightly bent. They're straight but slightly bent. If you lock your knees, it cuts off the circulation of your blood and you'll pass out. Group, tension, up. Right, face. Right, face. Right, face.
50 and a half.
So, while some young men stay home, others get fitted for uniforms.
31, 33.
And once in uniform, they learn the meaning of a top sergeant's command. They, too, had hometown jobs and girlfriends and plans for the future. Most of them don't want to go to Vietnam either, but some of them undoubtedly will.
Young man, today you got sworn in. Pick him up, get on that second truck. What are you doing, walking soldier?
The transition is made quickly, and the recruit is soon a soldier. But do they feel discriminated against? Another group of inductees riding an Army bus to their first day in basic training talked with me about their feelings on that first day.
A lot of guys dodge the draft by illegal means, by claiming that they've got a back defect or they got a bad eye or a knee injury, and when there's nothing wrong with them. I don't think this is fair.
You feel it's unfair that so many guys do manage to get out of it, guys who stay in school, for example?
Well, no, I don't believe it's unfair. If I was intelligent enough to think of some way to get out of it, I'd have tried to get out of it myself. I've just served my 2 years.
You think this is a patriotic duty that you have to do?
Well, if I was one of a few fellows going down to see Uncle Sam, I would say I would feel patriotic, but seeing as I'm just one of thousands, I don't feel so patriotic.
Would you like to see the system change so that either everybody went in or nobody did?
Well, I don't know about that so much, but I wouldn't say it's... I just feel that the people that are qualified to go in should go in. I think it does anybody good. Any kind of military training does a person good. They'll get some good out of it. You just make the most of it. That's all you got to do.
Well, is it fair then that so many people, for example, stay in school longer than they really want to or need to just to avoid the draft?
I have a friend of mine that I know of pretty well that he's trying to stay out of service by getting back into school next semester. He dropped out for a whole semester, but he's trying to get back in so he won't have to go into service. Well, I tell you, I don't care too much for it, but I mean, I figure he hasn't got enough guts to go ahead and do what he's got to do, and he'll end up doing it if he doesn't get married. It's got to come to it sometime, so I just figure you're putting it off, that's all.
The selection responsibility still falls to local draft boards, and CBS News correspondent Charles Kuralt visited such a panel in Virginia and asked the members about their duty.
Sometimes think about all the power that really is vested in this small board. You three men, after all, have the power to change the lives of all the young men in this county.
We're conscious of that, and that's why we try to make the men feel at ease. We're, in a way, we're tinkering with fate, you might say. This man goes and has a rendezvous with a bullet, maybe, and this one goes somewhere else. And we have that. We're conscious of that. We have to be in all our decisions. We know that if one man's deferred, the next man steps up.
The draft law says something about young men being picked for the Army by their friends and neighbors. Do you really feel that you're the friends and neighbors of the young men who come here before you?
As near as possible, because, for instance, Mr. Harrison is from Herndon, one end of the county. I'm from Falls Church, which is down the other end. Mr. Stevens is near the center of the county, Fairfax City. Yes.
But obviously you can't know all the young men who come up here.
And we have different backgrounds.
We certainly consider that they're picked by their friends, but now seldom by their neighbors, because we know very few of them.
Of course, I always bear in mind what a fellow once told me. When he got the telegram saying that he was being called by his friends and neighbors, he said they should have said my ex-friends and neighbors.
The man who has run the draft almost from its beginning is General Lewis Hershey, director of the Selective Service.
General Hershey, if President Johnson does increase the draft call because of the Vietnamese situation, how much manpower is available?
Well, there's a great deal of manpower available. We got over 1 million that are classified in 1A at the present time, and that doesn't by any means measure what you could get if you had to.
How quickly would the Selective Service system be ready to go into action with a bigger call?
Well, of course, we're ready now. There are some things that we always run into, and our biggest worry, if we can say we worry, and we try not to, is the speed with which our people can be examined by the armed forces. Because in the first place, we have to send them up for pre-induction examination, and if they pass, then send them up again. And I don't like to pick on other services, but if we got a bottleneck, it's not in the Selective Service. With the number of people we got, one for the examining, we can send them in at tremendous speed if necessary.
Draft calls are still small by wartime standards, but each skirmish in Vietnam, each new commitment, raises more doubts about the months to come. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Fairfax, Virginia.
Some draftees are in South Vietnam already, members of the 1st Infantry Division, whose units are protecting Army engineers at Cam Ranh Bay and defending the big U.S. air base at Bien Hoa. Last year, some of these soldiers were boys just out of school, knowing they probably had military service ahead of them. Now, many have combat experience behind them. Things are pretty basic for these men now, but even in Vietnam, there's time to relax occasionally.
Hey, who's got some peanut butter? I don't know about it.
Be glad when we get hot chow.
Yes.
which won't be long.
I gotta get me some water.
I got a canteen full.
You got that?
It ain't completely full, but it's wet.
Who got something?
It may be 3 days old.
CBS News correspondent Morley Safer went to Bien Hoa and talked with some of the draftees, members of the 1st Division's 2nd Brigade.
How do you fellows feel about being here as draftees?
Well, I think that the United States effort here in Vietnam is a necessary thing. And I think that any country that has been torn apart by the communists and where the United States does have a chance to come in and help them, I think that we should be here, and it's a necessary effort on our part.
How do you feel about being here?
I'd rather be home back on the block.
Disappointed to find yourself in the middle of the jungle here?
Oh, no, I'm looking forward to coming over. I'm glad I'm over here.
What do you consider as your job here?
Well, I think that is to try to establish part of, all of us put together is try to establish peace in this country, kick the communists out of here, out of the South Vietnam. That's all I could say. And try to make the people over here see the American people or the American soldier how they are. Things like that, you know.
You think you can win?
Oh, I know we can win. We're not worried about that, you know.
But winning, as in every war, has its price. This is a funeral service for casualties of the 2nd Brigade. Draftees killed in action. The first young casualties died at Bien Hoa only 4 days after they got there.
Over 1,000 persons turned out for Martin Luther King's first street corner rally of the day. Because of an illness contracted in Chicago over the weekend, he spoke for only 4 minutes, his shortest speech of the Northern tour, and he sounded the keynote of his goal in Cleveland.
There are approximately 40,000 Negroes of Cleveland who are not registered to vote, who are eligible to vote, of voting age, but who are not registered. And I submit to you that if we get the ballot in our hands and use it creatively, we can put in office in this city, on the school board of this city, and in major policy-making positions of this city, men and women who love mercy, who will do justly, and walk humbly with their God.
Later, when he led a rally in the silk-stocking suburb of Shaker Heights, 10 pickets representing the National Association for the Advancement of White People carried signs charging that King had communist connections, and they protested integration. There was no trouble as police maintained tight security precautions, and those attending the rally paid little or no attention to the picketers. Dr. King urged his audiences to attend a citywide mass meeting tonight. After a rest in Atlanta, he resumes his northern tour next week. Harry Arrow, CBS News, Cleveland.
This is a big day for socialism, for the Cuban government, and above all, for Fidel Castro. It's impossible to say how many people are gathered here in this field in the city of Santa Clara, but it's probably well over 100,000. They've come from all over Cuba to take part in what has to be one of history's great instances of organized mass adulation, with people fainting left and right from the heat, the emotion, and the pressing and swaying of the crowd. The ceremony is billed as an homage to the martyrs of Dr. Castro's 26th of July movement. But more than anything else, it is meant to honor a single man, Castro himself, or as these people call him, simply Fidel.
Y parejamente con la acción del enemigo se fue desarrollando el espíritu revolucionario.
Dr. Castro has taken a hard line today, blasting the United States, defending communism as something he believes in more every day, and vowing that Cuba will continue to encourage revolution throughout Latin America. At one moment, he took time out to comment on the fact that CBS News is here. I didn't want any American journalists to come to Cuba, he said, because of what the United States is doing in Vietnam and Santo Domingo. But somehow a correspondent from the Columbia Broadcasting System got in. And I challenge, said Castro, I challenge any leader of his country or America's puppet countries to get 500,000 people together in their support, as I have done today. Whatever Castro says is good is being applauded here today. What he says is bad is being booed. The banners and placards that you see here are typical of literally millions of others throughout the island. Wherever you go, in the smallest villages and the largest cities, you see them. Plastered on buildings, in store windows, in restaurants. Though you see other men's names and faces and the symbols of socialism, the central theme here is Fidel.
295 combatientes revolucionarios perdieron la vida.
People who have lived here for years say they've never seen anything like this concerted campaign of glorification of the Cuban leader. From the looks of things today, 12 years after the attack on the Moncada barracks, it would seem that Fidel Castro is well in control of his revolution. Bert Quint, CBS News in Santa Clara, Cuba.
A long and bitter labor dispute exploded into violence early today at the Harvey aluminum plant in Torrance, south of Los Angeles. Police were on hand, as they have been since the strike began April 4th. 2,000 union members are out. Non-union workers have kept the plant going at partial capacity. Each night, several hundred strikers gathered to jeer the non-union people, and this time it flared into rioting. There were 65 officers. When the trouble began, a call for help brought 100 more. Rocks, bricks, and bottles began flying. Strikers swung on policemen and non-union people alike. When police reinforcements arrived, the officers began pushing the strikers out of the company parking lot. There was plenty of police club swinging, but no gunfire. The union says the company refuses to bargain and accuses Harvey of stalling tactics. Harvey, the nation's fourth largest producer of aluminum, says it's studying the union proposal, will announce its decision next week. 6 police cars were battered, and after this, the second night of violence in a row, all parties are sure to be even edgier tonight. Bill Stout, CBS News, Los Angeles.
When the fighting slows down in any conflict, you have to do something to keep the troops occupied. And so every day in the rebel zone of Santo Domingo, there's a tour of the fighting commandos by what can only be described as a Dominican version of a USO show. These are Dominican radio and TV performers who support the rebel cause, who supply singing, dancing, and comedy routines throughout the tiny enclave of the city that they call the constitutional regime of the Republic. There is, however, something unusual about today's audience. These are not only troops, but also prisoners. Some 175 police and soldiers captured in the early days of the revolution and still held in custody by the rebel forces. And the theater is something special, too. It's a courtyard of the Ozama Fortress, the oldest fort built in the Western Hemisphere, constructed by the Spanish conquistadores over 400 years ago. More recently, a police barracks and detention center. The rebels say this is the first time in its history that there's been singing and dancing within these often grim walls. Entertainment, rebel style in the Dominican Republic. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Santo Domingo.
These Beach Boys have their surfing interrupted this week by a series of courtroom appearances. Jack Murph the Surf Murphy and Alan Kuhn have a tough time maintaining equilibrium as they ride the waves off Miami Beach. Murphy, Kuhn, and fellow Beach Boy Roger Clark appear confident they will beat the charge of stealing the priceless Star of India sapphire and other gems from a New York museum. Tomorrow, federal authorities will try and jail them for that theft. Wednesday, New York State will begin extradition proceedings. Today, they faced less serious local charges in Miami Beach City Court. Murphy showed up with his girlfriend, Bonnie Sutera, and Clark. Murphy was found guilty of using vulgar language. Vagrancy charges against Miss Sutera and Clark were tossed out. Murphy and Clark told of their newfound fame.
Has your popularity picked up along the beach where you surfboard?
We were always popular. They're still there. There's quite a few of them. But it gets a little annoying because it's, with this publicity, it's like the first string of the big football team and everybody wants to be around and they all giggle, but it's a big joke to everyone except us. It has become very serious, especially with our friends being beaten, with the harassment we've received and the embarrassment that it is. And very few other people think in the same tone that we do, as is the seriousness of it.
The fervor with which men seek out women as mates is probably exceeded only by the fervor with which women seek out men, for the very same reason. Neanderthal man used a club to persuade Neanderthal woman. An age or so later, matchmakers supplemented and often replaced the forces of love, taking some of the romance out of it. And now, in our own electronic age, the computer appears on the scene, and we have automated mating. This computer has been clicking and clacking away for a week now, pairing 625 boys with 625 girls for the computer dance. The computer dance idea is a simple one. Each student buys a ticket and fills out a questionnaire wanting to know about one's religion, one's politics, family background, dating habits, size, hobbies, race, whether one drinks and smokes, and what one thinks is important in a marriage partner. Then this information is put on punch cards. Those cards are sorted, and the couples are brought together.
Number 9. Number 99, 107. 114, 307. 115, 159. 116, 509. 117, 118, 145. 119, 70.
Some were apprehensive, some nervous, some thoroughly unimpressed, and in at least one case, the computer apparently blew a fuse.
86. Oh, that's not right. The computer goes. Have a nice time at the dance.
Jack Murph the Surf Murphy and his girlfriend, Bonnie Sutera, leave the U.S. Commissioner's office after the government won another 2-week delay for a hearing on charges that Murphy and fellow Beach Boy, Alan Kuhn, transported the Star of India sapphire and other jewels from New York to Miami. In a surprise act today, Murphy and Kuhn agreed voluntarily to return to New York tomorrow to face state charges in connection with the $400,000 American Museum jewel robbery. The pair of surfboarders like museums. Kuhn describes their last visit to New York.
We went to all the points of interest, including the museums, while we were in New York. It's a fact. Everyone knows this.
You like museums too, Mr. Murphy?
I am an avid museum goer. We've been to museums all over the country and art galleries. We go to all the points of interest. That was the main reason for going to New York, mainly the World's Fair and the World Series. And we went to museums and the concerts, and we had a wonderful time there.
You don't object to going back to New York tomorrow under different circumstances?
Well, we definitely not. We don't object. It probably won't be as enjoyable as it was the first time, but no, we don't object going back there.
Any more museum visits in store this trip?
No more visits to the museums. Not this trip.
The Reverend Martin Luther King is on Bimini, writing his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. From his island vacation retreat, King sent FBI Director Hoover a cable suggesting a personal get-together. King responded to Hoover's charge that the civil rights leader was the most notorious liar in the country.
Well, naturally, I was shocked and greatly surprised that Mr. Hoover would make such an unwarranted and vicious accusation. I don't think Mr. Hoover would have made such a statement if he had not been under a great deal of pressure. Probably he is beginning to falter under the awesome responsibilities, complexities, and burdens of his very difficult position, and for this reason, I would not like to get in a public debate with him. I've not done it in the past. My criticisms have always been of the FBI in general.
Do you believe the FBI is doing all it can to resolve civil rights complaints?
Well, I don't know all of the inner workings of the FBI. I do know that in cases that do not involve Negroes and civil rights, the FBI moves with dispatch. It has the machinery, the know-how to find bombings, for instance, of airplanes where you have the wreckage spread over 2 or 3 states. And the fact remains that in spite of all of the brutalities that we faced in Albany, Georgia, not a single arrest was made. In spite of the fact that 4 unoffending, innocent Negro girls were brutally murdered in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, not a single arrest has been made. And in spite of the fact that civil rights workers were killed this summer in Mississippi, we haven't seen...
The war started after Otis Matthews, assistant business manager of the International Woodworkers of America at the Masonite Company plant in Laurel, was kidnapped by what he called Klan members, beaten with leather straps and doused with a chemical. It's believed Matthews was attacked because of the Union's support of a federal order giving Negroes equal treatment at Masonite. Several Negroes have moved into supervisory positions through seniority. Today, the Union issued a statement denouncing the Klan and told them any further incidents will be met by death. Matthews said for the first time in his life, he's carrying a gun.
Mr. Matthews, what's going to come of all this? What is this going to do to the town of Laurel, Mississippi?
It could destroy it or it could build it. And that depends again on the people of this city and this state. If they decide they're going to have law and order, if they're going to stand up for the decency, if they're going to be a part of these United States, the city of Laurel and this county can be just as big as they want to be. And I believe the people of this country will come here and support us if we will try to stand up for decency.
One of the 18 members of the Union local at the plant is J.D. Jolly, the Union president and a business agent. I asked him what's going to happen to the community if the Klan violence continues.
It's going to cause us to go back in the dark ages and to make a regular jungle out of a community that's always been a wholesome community to live in, and make it unsafe for our wives and our children to walk the streets in safety.
Mr. Jolly, what have you as an individual had to do to protect yourself against any possible future attacks against you or any other member of the Union?
Under the advice of the legal authority, we've had to arm ourselves. And for the first time, I'm personally carrying a gun at all times.
Is that gun loaded?
It certainly is.
There's the doctor's doctor, the lawyer's lawyer, even the reporter's reporter. And now, meet the bookmaker's bookmaker.
Yes, and I'm betting on...
He's taking bet from people whose business it is to take bets themselves. In the opening sweepstakes of the London Bookmakers' Fair, these fillies are competing for the title of Miss Betting Shop 1964. As good bookmakers always do, they're laying odds strictly on form.
And I bet on the first 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, what would you like, sir? 15. Just a sec, not too strong. How much? £150 to 15. And from Gus Demi, and from Manchester, £150 to 15. I laid down to Mr. P. Goldberg. Thank you. Do you want a ticket? $7.97. Give him a ticket. Advertise and tell your friends. 6 tenors. A very likely one. Sheila, £60 to 10. No, each way. No. The same, Mr. Goldberg, please. Can I have a place bet only? Place only. It'll have to be 1, 2, or 3 of the odds. Right. Thank you. And I'll you do have a place only. Jane, I'll lay you £33 to 10. Actually, £33, 6 and 8. I'll be fair with you, a good customer. I'll lay you £33 10 to £10. Well done. Down to Mr. Pete Goldberg. They're all on the same ticket. There's only one can win. Thank you. Hurry up, please. Now, as I lay them, I lower them. Please place your bets. Money when you win. That's the beauty of it.
They're off. These girls are the shock absorbers of Britain's thriving betting shop industry. It's 2 to 1 that it doesn't hurt so much to lose your money if you do it through them.
Cambodia seems happily out of place in the 20th century. Its capital, like Saigon used to be so long, long ago, is lovely and serene. Nobody is in a hurry. People have time to smile, and little reason not to. There aren't enough cars to create a traffic jam. There is no factory or engine smoke, and for that matter, no helicopters in the air. Only things that look good and smell good and make you feel good. Flowering trees, an unpolluted sky, and above all, a feeling of tranquility. That's the way it has always been here. Now, though, it's beginning to change. It looks kind of nice at first glance to see these girls singing as they march down the streets of Phnom Penh. And most of the time, the rifles the Home Defense Force has just been issued hang from the branches of the trees. It's too hot to keep carrying them. On a warm April day in Phnom Penh, even with the youngsters marching in the street, you like to think that this city will never change. Then you remember that other city in old French Indochina, Saigon, and it saddens you because you know what could happen. Bert Quint, CBS News in Phnom Penh.
Tiger is not the crusading type. He isn't even the best basketball player at Yale. He's a nice Jewish boy from Jersey who went to Yale and who is now writing a paper on the need or non-need of commercial television networks.
Well, Jack, how does it feel to be a cause célèbre?
Well, it's been an interesting experience, and I've come across a lot of new ideas that I hadn't thought of before.
What kind of ideas?
Well, concerning various rulings and laws that have been existent concerning amateur sports and collegiate sports.
You think the NCAA then was definitely wrong?
Well, I don't know if the word wrong is a word to use, but I do think that they might have been extreme in their ruling and in their judgment. And I do think that they should re-examine the rulings that they have already.
If you had it to do over again, would you?
I think I would. If I had all the backing that I had up to this point from Yale and my teammates and so forth, I think that I would definitely do it because of an extremely worthwhile experience.
NCAA and the AAU both must be made realize that the athletes are the only important thing. Thousands of boys like Jack Langer are being victimized by this continuing, enervating, and stupid feud. It's not a question of who is right. They are both wrong. And Yale, by recognizing this and refusing to penalize the athlete, has taken the first major step to de-escalating the feud.
What do you think can be done or must be done to end this power struggle between the AAU and the NCAA?
Well, again, I naively hope that there are reasonable men on both sides who can be brought together to discuss this rationally and calmly and without fear of giving way publicly. One of the big problems right now is that institutions and organizations are so terribly conscious of face-saving in this situation. And in this kind of a situation, you get organizations putting more value on the fight than on the issue. Instead of trying to find the truth, they're trying to save face. And I think this is a very, very serious handicap to negotiation.
The differences of opinion between the NCAA and the AAU is quite a complicated matter. But as in any power struggle, to settle it, somebody's going to have to give up something. The noted labor negotiator, Theodore Kiel, does not paint a very rosy picture. After talking to both sides, he said that the NCAA and the AAU make the Teamsters look like doves. But if these organizations persist in expending their energies in their differences and ignoring the athlete, one of them, one morning very soon, will wake up with all the power and find that they have no one over which to exercise it, for they will have destroyed amateur athletics in the United States. In the meantime, Yale has taken a stand that may stop this war. A stand every bit as strong and as sturdy as her lovely Gothic towers.
Charlie Company had been on patrol in the field since March 24th, and as the men were being resupplied this time, it was becoming apparent that no one knew clearly what they were doing now or what their mission was. The men were glad to get a hot meal instead of sea rations, their normal diet for the 3 days between resupply. Today, it was ham, stewed tomatoes, sweet potatoes, grapefruit, peaches, tea, and Kool-Aid. Privately, the men were complaining about the seeming lack of organization and coordination Charlie Company was now experiencing since the loss of its former commander, Captain Robert Jackson, and the critical injury of its battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hannis. Flaky was the word heard most often now, a GI expression meaning that the company and the battalion did not seem to be operating as efficiently as before. The next day, the new company commander receives orders to move his men nearly a mile, the plan calling for them to be picked up by helicopters to make a combat assault. The orders also say to move down a road, something the veterans in Charlie Company had been taught by their former commander never to do. 2nd Platoon in the lead refuses to walk down the road. To them, it is too flaky, too risky, too much of an opportunity for the North Vietnamese to ambush them. But Captain Rice has received orders from higher up in the command to move down the road. Even the other officers are in disagreement, trying to work out a safer way to complete their mission. No one in the company is quite sure what to do when more than 100 men, almost all of them combat veterans and normally well-disciplined, refuse to obey. Captain Rice, who has already served 1 tour in Vietnam and is an experienced officer himself, decides to exercise his authority.
We're going to move out on the road, period. Now, either we're going to move out and they're going to get left behind, or I'm going to take the point and they can follow me if they want to. Now, it's that simple. Now, we got a job to do, we're going to do it. It's not half as dangerous as doing some of the crap we've done out here in the boonies, walking through them. At least we can see what we're doing.
What's the problem?
Well, we just don't want to work on the road. This is one of the things that I told you about when we were wondering what a new CO was going to be like. And these are the kind of things that you don't want to have him be like.
Like what?
Walking down a road.
Shooting gallery.
Like a sitting duck.
Suddenly, a compromise appears. A helicopter pilot spots a possible landing zone closer to Charlie Company's position, about 300 yards down the road in the other direction. Captain Rice changes his orders.
Get it over with, we'll move out, and it'll be okay. That's right. The longer we sit here, the worse it gets.
Everybody's going this way.
Okay, let's go.
The rebellion begins to recede. Reluctantly, Charlie Company moves out down the road. The men are angry now and afraid. But the enemy is not waiting, and 2nd Platoon, in the lead, reaches its destination and begins clearing the brush around 2 bomb craters for the helicopters to come in and take them out. The mission accomplished, Captain Rice calls a conference among his platoon leaders and the other officers and a discussion about discipline under orders.
So it's going to be up to each and every one of you. I can't run around and kick everybody in the butt. I can't run around and build everybody's ego up. You're going to have to back me up if I say something. And believe me, if it's bad, I'll know it's bad. And you just have to make it out what you can, make out the best you can. Any questions? Okay, let's get this LZ built and get out of here. I'm glad we didn't have to walk over.
The helicopters come in slowly, one at a time, lifting out the men of Charlie Company to a staging area nearby, where they'll take off for the combat assault. Waiting to make the assault, the men in 2nd Squad discuss the day's developments.
Road was suicide walk, right there on the mud. His road clearing is about maybe 6-7 feet wide, big enough for a vehicle, and on both sides of the road there was nothing but thick brush. You could have had a goop 3 feet inside that wood line and you couldn't have seen him for love nor money. And with this, we had an old APC bus running parallel with the road that we could have walked just as easily and a lot safer. But passed down, walked the road, and that is about the flakiest thing I've ever done since I've been in and I won't do it again. Come hell or high water, I won't do it again.
I don't think he knows the stuff.
He hadn't been a captain but maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And he's got a lot of stuff to learn before he can manage a company like Captain Jackson could.
I'll tell you, somebody's heads are going to roll when this whole thing's over with. I don't know whose, maybe mine, but heads are going to roll, and it's about time. You can't do what we did this morning and get away with it. We happen to be lucky, but I am not going to try that one again. I don't feel that lucky.
If there is another dimension to the minor rebellion of Charlie Company, it is that 100 experienced soldiers, most of whom believe in the biggest picture of all, the political reasons for the Vietnam War, veteran soldiers who are not afraid of combat, normally brave and obedient men, would not walk down a road that to them was symbolic of the way 40,000 other GIs had gone before. John Lawrence, CBS News in War Zone
Federal
C.
reaction to Governor Kirk's second suspension of the school superintendent was swift. U.S. Marshals arrived at the school administration building this morning with warrants for the arrest of 3 Kirk aides. Behind closed doors, they met resistance from Manatee Sheriff Richard Weitzenfeld and arrested him and 5 of his deputies. The sheriff prevented marshals from removing their prisoners, and Kirk aides locked themselves in the superintendent's office. A U.S. Marshal talked with them from a reception room telephone.
You say the governor has ordered you to keep the door locked and to continue operating the school system behind that door. And you're going to refuse us the right to execute the federal court order. Mm-hmm. All right, sir. Thank you.
After that plea, marshals left the building. Kirk's men remained locked in the office. Outside, John Barr explained why no prisoners were taken.
The sheriff ordered his deputies to physically restrain us to do so. Says he has innumerable highway patrolmen standing by to stop us if we get out of the building, so on and so forth. And it's just not feasible at this moment.
So you then chose to back away from a possible physical conflict?
That's correct.
If there would have been one, had you carried out your instructions as you'd been told to do?
As far as I'm concerned, I know there would be.
The sheriff not be carried physically away.
He's ordered his deputies to stop us from taking anyone out of the building, including himself.
Governor Kirk was in Tallahassee throughout the conversation, his wife giving birth to a son. After the arrests, he reacted.
Will you submit to arrest peacefully if the federal marshals
certainly not. Listen, what does a PFC do in Vietnam? What do you say?
In other words, you consider yourself at war?
We're not fighting any Italian wars, pal. You know, we're playing for serious matters.
So you will resist arrest if the marshals try to arrest you?
No. I will resist any illegal act.
I think the reason for it is very simple, actually. People are traveling more. There are some better cookbooks written, though most cookbooks are perfectly god-awful. We have more imported foods. People want to eat better because they've eaten better in other countries. And I think little by little we're developing a cuisine of our own, and that's why people are beginning to want to cook better, so to speak. And our restaurants on the whole in America leave a great deal to be desired, from my point of view. And then there's no help around. So the woman who has never cooked before suddenly finds herself having to cook out of sheer necessity. But even having to cook, she discovers that cooking is really terribly exciting and meaningful.
There is also this trend to have, for the housewife, to have things done for her, so you see more frozen things.
Well, that's rather deplorable from my view, and I spend my life, it seems to me, attacking the frozen convenient foods. They are indeed convenient, but for the manufacturer, not the housewife, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, what happens is that it's just as easy, for example, to make mashed potatoes. It's true you have to peel them, but if you're very clever, for example, you would know that you could take take potatoes and not peel them, and boil them, cut them up with their peel on, put them in a pot of boiling water, and then put the whole thing through a ricer, and the peel sticks to the ricer. You have mashed potatoes, and maybe 10 minutes more than that dreadful woolly stuff you buy.
You're known internationally for foods and cooking. Do you cook yourself at home?
I do all the cooking at home. When I married my wife 20 years ago, she said, I'm through with cooking forever.
Has she stuck to that?
Absolutely. Why should she suffer? She's not to suffer. First of all, I'm a professional teacher of cooking, a writer, etc., and I do it more easily than she does. She's fascinated all the time, but I do it because I do it.
You do want to prepare something, a favorite of yours along French cooking, I think a French omelet.
Here's the way a professional would crack an egg. But the egg should be cold, otherwise you're liable to end up with a terrible mess on your hands. Look at this. 1, 2, look at that. 3, like this. Back and forth, back and forth. And you spread your fingers apart, and you get rid of every bit of the... And then what you do, if you're really economical, you should do that. That's 1 egg. Here's another one. And then instead of beating the yolks first, you beat the white first. Right. Until finally you've beaten it until it's stiff. And I'll show you what I mean by stiff. Look. Then the next step, very simply, is to take this and beat this. If you did it the other way around, the white simply would not get stiff because there was too much fat in the egg yolk. This way you don't have to wash the beater. Then the next thing you do very simply is you take the egg yolks and put it over the egg whites, like this. Look, very simply. Then you fold it in the way you do a souffle, by going under, look, and over, and cutting around like this, until finally you have something which really looks like a souffle, and it's not a souffle. You take an 8-inch pan like that, take a piece of butter, like this, and you hopefully wait for it to get hot. Then, look what happens. Put it in like this. You notice I use a rubber spatula, which is the greatest invention since fire, I think. And then you spread it, look, in the pan, over fairly high heat, actually enough, like that, until finally you have a circular mass. You don't have to worry too much about whether it's even or not. And what you do is you let it cook a while. And all you do now, very simply, is lift it up like that. Take the plate like this, and start sliding it out like this. But don't go too far, otherwise you're going to get into trouble. Look, like that. See? Look at that.
Who do you really think make better cooks, men or women?
I think women are infinitely better cooks than men.
Thank you.
Are you surprised to hear that?
No.
No, actually they are better cooks than men because they're more patient. They generally have better palates. They're less exhibitionistic than men are. They tend to be a little more cautious. And they tend to be thriftier. They don't waste food. I can give you one reason after the other, which doesn't mean, of course, that some of the greatest cooks in the world have been men. But then, of course, they've been great cooks because they've been great cooks in restaurants.
The South Vietnamese expected no picnic along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, of course, but neither did they foresee the North Vietnamese strength that showed itself a week after the invasion began. Human wave attacks, a sudden return to conventional warfare from the hit-and-run tactics of the guerrilla. The volume of tanks and artillery of the communists was not expected. Route 9 was never opened as deeply into Laos as the High Command had hoped. The armored column on the road came out with roughly half the vehicles, tanks and personnel carriers, that it drove in. American helicopters, which took most of the South Vietnamese into Laos, were relied on to bring them out. Some of these pullbacks have been disorderly, panicky, not with these troops. These men belong to the Airborne Division, one which has always had a good reputation. They left no weapons scattered behind them in Laos, as had units of the 1st Division. On arrival at their base near Khe Sanh, the troops formed automatically into squad rank and file. One of their advisors was waiting for the unit to return. The advisor, Sergeant Russell Bateman, had not seen the men in 45 days. Did they indicate they were able to inflict heavy casualties on the North Vietnamese?
I know they did.
They did, huh?
Raj, I've seen the equipment we've sent back, and the body counts that they're getting are real good.
These men made an orderly withdrawal on foot. They said the enemy was very strong, that there was much death on both sides. Jed Duval, CBS News, Dong Ha, South
The Memphis Art Academy usually operates without much fanfare or controversy, but their most recent international photography show brought reaction not only from some segments of government, but from one man who took the situation in his own hands. An armed man wearing a beard, wig, sunglasses, and wide-brim hat walked into the home of Dr. Richard Beatty, a part-time instructor at the academy, tied Beatty and his 2 daughters, and forced Beatty's 14-year-old son to leave with him, saying the boy would be released when the pictures were removed.
There are some photographs of nudes in the show. that these must be removed, and that the people at the Memphis Academy of Arts would agree not to use any nude models in the work at the Academy. And so then he left with Eddie as a hostage and said that if I complied with his demands, then I would get Eddie back safely, but that if I did not, then his life was in jeopardy. And that he felt like any displays of this nature were immoral, and that they were corrupting the youth, and that he felt like it was his own personal responsibility to purge Memphis of this evil influence for the sake of his family.
What happened last night after you left the house?
We got in Dad's little Volkswagen Squareback, and he was nervous, but I had to, even with my head covered, I had to pull the seat up for him, and I lay down in the back, and in that car we rode around for a little while, and then switched to another car and drove around in that, but he never seemed to say that he wanted to harm me or anything.
Did he say anything to you about the Academy or about the display?
He just said it had caused him many sleepless nights just thinking about it. It really made him sick.
The pictures were removed, and Dr. Beatty, as directed by the kidnapper, made the announcement on a local television station. The Academy says the pictures will not go back on display, but Academy director says the incident will not change policy on what will or will not be shown. Del Vaughn, CBS News, Memphis.
This is Tennessee's maximum security prison. For the past 3 years, James Earl Ray has been in prison here. Since his imprisonment, he has repeatedly refused to grant interviews or photographs with the press. 20 Tennessee newsmen visited this prison for the institution's annual open house. The newsmen were taken to cell block C, where Ray is imprisoned. Ray, as usual, refused to talk to the press and hid under his blankets. Later, Ray, who was somewhat slimmer than his pre-prison pictures show, asked prison chaplain Herbert Carlock, Jr. if he could talk to Knoxville News Sentinel reporter Willard Yarborough. Then, Ray granted me a short interview. He said the reason he could not talk to the press was in orders from his attorney, Bernard Finsterwald. He said his lawyer told him that interviews could jeopardize his appeals to overturn his conviction. Ray said he spends his time writing memos to Finsterwald and said he is just another prisoner and is treated as one. Cell Block C is, however, somewhat special. The prisoners here are granted considerably more freedom than the other prison inmates. They can roam freely from cell to cell within the cell block, as their personal cell doors are always left open. Ray's cellmates describe him as a model prisoner and say there is no animosity directed against him. There are no blacks in Cell Block C. Carl Warner, Knoxville, Tennessee.
It's unlikely that McLyman's High School offers the instruction in Homeric lyre suggested on its walls, but it has contributed heavily to the odes of sport. Through its doors and classes have passed heroes: Frank Robinson, Kurt Flood, Veda Pinson, Bill Russell, each worthy of a triumphant chord. Perhaps because this Oakland, California school has been such an athletic pantheon, the daydreams of its students have a sharper focus than most. The play at ghetto schools always has a sawtooth edge of force and fire. This is not the coltish, undisciplined hippie-hop of the average schoolyard. To these competitors, remembering the men who once swirled under these baskets and across the playing fields, the game is the gateway to a world which offers more than shifting for survival. For many who rocketed from Oakland to the big time, the man who lit the fuse was a quiet, patient coach with an eye which spotted the big leaguer inside the small boy. George Pohl's scrapbook is their story.
Well, I was a frustrated ball player myself, and this was the next best thing to it as far as I was concerned, helping kids, and so I just spent an awful lot of time with the youngsters.
Coaching at the high school and supervising playground teams of all ages, Pohl's spread his word widely and well. His American Legion teams won successive national championships in 1949 and 50, producing in J.W. Porter one of baseball's first bonus boys. As a basketball coach, he pushed Bill Russell through adolescent awkwardness to the first glimmerings of greatness. Coaching John Brody, quarterback of the 49ers, as a baseball player, he taught him clutch coolness, and from teams as varied as the juniors' sweet shop midgets and the high school nine, he provided a whole outfield to Cincinnati.
An outfield now scattered across 2 leagues, but still grateful for more than fielding tips and hitting secrets.
Speaking was my problem. George would take me along to a lot of banquets. He got me started talking in front of the microphone. I very seldom would get up. It was direct, right to the point. Yes, no, thank you very much, and maybe next time. I come out of his habit, and I owe this a lot to the man. He could see this. The man had so much, he could see ahead. He could see years ahead.
George ran maybe 4 or 5 teams at one time, and he made sure we got a chance to get in there and get a lot of work. Made sure we had gloves and equipment to use, and gave us a little incentive that you just found it very difficult to come by back in the ghetto. He was interested more than anything else, and genuinely wanting us to play baseball and stay out of trouble too.
George Pohl's time didn't end with the school day when it ended. He gave you time after school. He gave you time on Saturdays. He gave you time on Sundays. And any time that you wanted anything to do with baseball, he gave you the time. If you wanted to go out and hit, he would go out and throw it to you. If you wanted to talk baseball afterwards at night, you could go to his house and talk baseball. He was just a baseball man. It's just too bad that some organization didn't pick him up to help kids when they first went into baseball.
Pohl's is now assigned to a gleaming new school in the hills above Oakland. It is long on amenities, but in the hopes and choices it offers its students, games are just something for a sunny afternoon.
It's different. These kids, they don't play ball all year round like the kids did in those days. And in that area, and I'm different too. I think that I don't go at it the way I used to. We've had several good ball players from here. Nobody's made it yet in the pros. A lot of them want to, but they just don't put as much time into it as the kids used to.
As long as there are hopefuls on a baseball field and Pohl's is able to bend far enough to roll a ball, he will go on imparting the knowledge which in the right hands and hearts can lead on to the pot of gold at the end of the base path. But his greatest pleasure now is the occasional message from Olympians like Frank Robinson.
He called from the hotel in San Francisco and was going to leave me tickets for the game, and he asked me if I'd seen the last series that was here, and I told him that I thought he was moving his head a little bit at that time and wasn't hitting the ball as well as he should have, but it corrected itself, and we've had little chats like that. Frank is doing the coaching now and helping the young fellas on his club, and I'm sure he's doing a fine job.
The increasing tensions between the races in Oakland have curtailed Pohl's out-of-school work. But those who feel that his face shows him to be the enemy might listen to those who've known him.
We all have a chance to go either way. And I'm thankful that he helped lead me up the right road. Quite naturally, my family had a lot to do with it too, but there's a lot of times I wasn't at home. I was with George, and I could have gone the other road. And this man doesn't hesitate, you know. I can't praise him enough. It's just one of those things that the man saved me.
For George Pohl's, the hope of a place in the Hall of Fame flickered and went out with a minor league tryout. But as the plaques go up at Cooperstown, he can hope that there are some which bear the polish of his patient push toward the best.
I wouldn't change my life in any way. I've had a good life, and these kids have been a tremendous help to me. I've had a lot of fun and a lot of thrills, and I'm still having them. And I'm looking forward to retirement in another year. And this will continue, I think, the thrills that I'm getting from these fellows that played ball for me.
This is Haywood Hale Broun in Oakland.
Each day a unit called Bravo Company patrols down this dusty road. Last week the men of Bravo Company caused a stir when they refused to face another ambush on Route 9. They had faced 3 that day when they finally said no more. But this road, an escape route from Quezon, is just as dangerous. The men are being ambushed almost daily, but they're still fighting. They haven't opted out of the war. The previous night, down in this narrow valley, Bravo Company was caught in still another ambush. 2 companies, including Bravo, were patrolling when hit. 6 were killed, including 4 from Bravo. They finally had to withdraw, leaving behind those believed killed. Air Force jet fighters are called in to hit an enemy mortar position on the hillside above them. The entrenched North Vietnamese are hit with napalm and bombs, but it doesn't impress Bravo Company. Most of them believe the Dinks, as they call the enemy, will live through it and keep on ambushing them. But the men of Bravo Troop, which is part of the Americal Division, are run down, and their decision on Route 9 is still very much on their minds.
The men had just had it, I guess. They were fatigued. We were staying up to 12 o'clock each night, you know, for regard, and then we'd go to sleep, get 4 hours of sleep, and then 6:30 in the morning we'd head right on out and minesweep the road and get hit again. So many guys got hit. They just didn't want to, you know, figure next time you go down the road, you'd probably get hit yourself, you know. The lack of, I think it was the support parts, you know, we'd burn them up and, you know, we couldn't get nothing to replace them. As far as once our cruiser weapons went out, you know, we were depending on our 16s and no magazines.
As Bravo Troop watches the air show, one of their own comes limping out. He was wounded when a North Vietnamese threw a grenade at him as he attempted to recover a body. His concerned buddies rushed to help him up the hillside. Another GI has been wounded, and more men from Bravo Troop head out to help their buddies. Last night, in a position near here, some of these men heard a voice crying in the night, "Help me, help me." Some of those men who had to be left behind might have been still alive. At the crest of the hill, they meet others bringing out the first body. The men are exhausted. It's not just this clash, it's a culmination of nearly 3 months in the field, much of it in combat. But these men have found only 3 of the 6 who were believed killed and who were left behind. They'll have to go down again, and they'll go. Bravo Troop, after 3 ambushes, once said it wouldn't go down Route 9 again. But the men didn't quit. They're still in heavy contact, they're still being ambushed, and they're still fighting. Jeff Williams, CBS News, with Bravo Troop in Vietnam.
Would you welcome the world famous with the most unusual name, Nudie. Nudie?
This is Nudie. He's a tailor. You don't ordinarily find tailors on talk shows, but Nudie is hardly an ordinary tailor. He's a Hollywood tailor. He runs the Savile Row of cowboy costumes, and he's in the oldest, the best of the Hollywood tradition. Just about everything Nudie does is larger than life. He fancies up his cars at a cost of $21,000 each, and he has 2 of them. Instead of a horn, he uses a tape deck, and even that has a Western flavor. Nudie was born in Brooklyn with the name of Nudie Cohn, but he prefers to be known as just Nudie. He's 68 years old. He has been in this business since 1946. Before tailoring, he was a shoeshine boy, a boxer, and in vaudeville. He runs a shop in Hollywood devoted to Western clothing. But more than a shop, it is Nudie. It is his own bold and colorful statement.
Years ago, I used to be in the G-string business, and I never did care for it. And the kind of business that I always like is among show people. That, you know, Western business is an American game. They have been wearing Western clothes ever since I've been a little boy. I used to play Indian and cowboy all my life, you know, when I lived in Brooklyn. Even there, kids always played cowboy during Tom Mix's days and what have you. So you see, Western clothes will always be good. It'll always get better, you know. There's a change of styling today, and you take 35, 40 years ago, if a man walked out there with a red shirt, I think they'd crown him, they'd kill him or do something. Not today. The men are wearing clothes that are loud and flashy. And for an example, me, I can go to a restaurant tonight with this suit on, and I'll be more or less admired, you know. The girls will go for me, and the men, of course, feel that they ain't got the guts to wear it, but they'd like to wear it. And years to come, that's what we'll be wearing, things like that.
Nudie is much more than a tailor. He's an institution with 20 employees and a business gross of about $1 million a year. In show business alone, he has 4,000 persons on his mailing list, and many more customers than that. He turns out more than 1,000 tailor-made costumes each year, ranging in price from a few $100s to several $1,000s apiece. Just a pair of boots can go for $250 or more. A gold-mounted saddle, $6,500. The single most expensive suit he ever made was a gold lame for Elvis Presley, $10,000. With prices like those, he has done a lot of business with celebrities over the years.
He's going back across the world to see that gal of yesterday.
Judy Lynn and her country western group.
When he returns to wander.
Judy budgets more than $35,000 a year for clothes from Nudie. She has more than 50 changes of costume.
Because I always said this, if you're going to be in show business, be in show business and wear a suit that's in show business. And as long as I can remember, when I was used to live around 47th and Broadway, shine shoes for Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson, Sam Timberg and all them people. I used to sell a newspaper and buy their sandwiches. When they'd get out there on the stage, they'd wear beautiful suits, you know, every one of them. And that's why they were a hit. And as you know, today, you don't have to wear a suit with rhinestones, but you can wear something beautiful.
Nudie may never threaten the high priests of high fashion in Paris, Laurent, Balmain, Cardin, but he certainly has come a long way from Brooklyn, and in the process, he's made the West a bit brighter, a lot more colorful. Bill Stout, CBS News, Hollywood.